questions. Let's get to the main questions or the main topic of this class. So I promised you last week that we will start talking about design systems, evolutionary look on design, and how perhaps these things can help you become even better designers, if it is possible at all. And still, we have to bear in mind that we are in a class that is called user-centered design. So my focus or my idea is also to stress or emphasize, why the things I'm going to talk about are important for your users as well. Hopefully, I'll manage to do that. So one of the questions that we can ask today is, why is design in fact redesign? Is design individual or collective activity? What does evolutionary theory have to do with design? What does it mean for theory and praxis of design if we talk about design as a redesign and as a sort of evolutionary process? And what does it mean for you as students? And what does it mean for me as a perhaps teacher who likes talking and teaching design? Okay. Just for the sake of brevity and that I'm recording the video, I just want to remind you that last week we did the fundamental principles of interaction by Don Norman, and we talked about discoverability, more specifically how affordance, how feedback, how signifiers, how mappings, constraints, conceptual model, how these are principles, or let's say, I think principles and rules contribute or do not contribute to better design, and how they help users to learn and understand your design better and faster. So that's what we did last week's. Today, as I promised, we will be talking about these things, and we will start with a text, and I'll be rather personal here. I'll just want to tell you why I've chosen this specific text, because it's not a major text. It's written by a Czech design historian who's been living and teaching in Norway at Norwegian architecture and design schools. He comes back to Prague, to Czech Republic from time to time, and he has published one book, which is a book of the collection of his essays. And I wouldn't call him a major design historian, a major design theoretician, but I really love one of his essays. I actually like a few of them, but I like specifically this one. And this essay changed my own understanding of what design is, and how I should be practicing design as a designer, or how I should teach about design. And I'm really curious about your reactions to his thoughts. We will start today, or this week, we will start his text, and we will be finishing the final part of the text at the beginning of our next class. Okay, so Jan Michl, he's a design historian, theoretician, a Czech one, but he writes in many languages, in English, in Norwegian, even in Spanish, or at least he translates his text to these languages. I'm not actually sure whether he speaks or he writes Spanish, but I think he understands it. He writes in Norwegian. Okay, so I did send you the text of his. So if you can just have it open in front of you, it can be helpful, because I'll perhaps ask you to read a few sentences from his text. But if you do have it in front of you, you can see that the text actually begins with these quotations from rather famous people, historians, philosophers. And all of these quotes, I'll come back to the first one that says, every picture owes more to other pictures painted before than it owes to nature. So Gombrich, he's perhaps the most famous art historian of at least 20th century. And I think almost all art history students read his books, and he says that pictures, meaning paintings, and mostly paintings, all something to other paintings rather than something in nature. So it's not a coincidence. It's not random natural process, random thoughts in our heads, but it seems like artists are more influenced by other pictures than let's say looking at a nice scenery and painting the scenery. So they are more influenced by previous pictures than what they actually see in front of their eyes. Okay, so the other quote, Pierre Bourdieu, famous sociologist, but it's not necessary to know his work. He says that one of the most important properties of all fields of production, he is using this Marxist sociologist terms, but never mind, is the permanent presence of the past of the field, which is endlessly recalled even in the very breaks which fetched it to the past. Okay, it's a very convoluted, very French way to write about things. But basically what he says, I believe, that whenever we create something, we are always surrounded by this invisible field of our past that influences us. Then one of my favorite, actually, historians of technology, he says, George Bazela, any new thing that appears in the made word, the artificial word that we created, is based on some object already in existence. Each new technological system emerges from an antecedent previous system, such as each new discrete artifact emerges from antecedent artifacts. In other words, what George Bazela says, that everything we can see around us, as Steve Jobs in the first or the second presentation of our class, I showed you this famous YouTube video of Steve Jobs saying that he realized that every single thing, every single technology, buildings around us were created by someone who was not smarter than you. We can dispute that. I think architects are pretty smart people, and designers, engineers. But let's say everything around us was created by someone else. That's true. And in addition to that, Bazela says that anyone who creates something doesn't start, just from scratch. We are always influenced by things, artifacts, buildings, designs, technologies that someone else created in the past. And Steve Jobs is a prime example of that. I told you about his famous visit to Xerox PARC laboratories in the US, which really was at the pinnacle of computer technology. And he saw several things in their laboratories, apart from object-oriented programming, apart from networking meaning many computers being connected to a network, which was in, let's say, 1980s. It was really in even 70s. That was something quite, spectacular. He saw one thing that really struck him as the most important thing that he saw up to that moment, which was graphical user interface and using mouse and keyboard to actually move objects on your screen. And he was influenced by that. And please remember this word or this phrase, to be influenced by, because we will talk about it in next screens in relation to what you do as designers. And so Steve Jobs himself was influenced by this Xerox PARC graphical user interface, and he went and actually implemented graphic user interface. Sorry, I was just reading a message from you, Lucy, in our chat. That she was running out of battery. Okay, hopefully she's back. Okay, you're back. Oh, you will be back. So he was influenced by something, something that someone else created, and it became really a hit because thanks to graphical user interface created by Xerox PARC laboratories, Apple actually became what Apple is. In a way, user-friendly type of computer, or at least at the beginning, it was much more user-friendly than other computers. Then Windows and other systems and companies followed. Okay, I actually like this quote the best, I think. If anybody were to start where Adam started, meaning Adam from the Genesis book of Bible, he would not get further than Adam did. And one of the most famous philosophers of 20th century, Karl Popper, he actually said that in a slightly different context, but I like this quote, and Jan Michl likes this quote as well. Basically, if you wanted to start from scratch, you wouldn't get far. You wouldn't get further than like anyone else to nowhere. So you have to build on other people to actually get somewhere. And last quote by a famous astronomer. He was really popular. He still is in the US. He had extremely popular science TV shows in the US. In the UK as well, I think. If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. In other words, it's impossible to make apple pie something that that popular as apple pie from scratch, because you will always build upon the knowledge of other people, inevitably. Okay, and if you really want to say that I have invented apple pie from scratch, you just have to live in in another universe, not in this one, because in this universe someone already invented apple pie. Okay, so just focus on this quote. If anybody were to start where Adam started, he would not get further than Adam did. Okay. Any reactions to that? Apart from what I've said, what came to your mind when you read it for the first time? Did you know that he was talking about Adam from Bible, or was it not that obvious?
Yeah. Can I talk?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Like, I mean, it's basically how it is, I think, but it somehow reminds me of that, like there's the page that chicken was the first or the egg was the first,
Yeah.
And
what's your answer to this question?
well, I mean, like the answer. We probably don't know what was the first, but then, I mean, me as a Christian, I would say chicken was the first, but then we don't know actually. So, well, I mean, it's basically a nonsense, I think, to think about it at this point. I mean, living in a 21st century, I mean, it's too obvious, I think.
Yeah, but if I can just make, I think in a way, it doesn't matter to, it's not important to answer this question with the chicken and egg, because we sort of realize that without a chicken, there would be nowadays no egg, and without eggs, there would be no chickens, right? So they are interrelated. So there is a sort of, like connection between those two. And I think it's a nice metaphor, that you reminded us this metaphor, or this sort of like saying, because we can even imagine you or us as designers and what we create as something similar. That we may be like the chicken and the egg is design products. What was designed by someone else, and and what was designed by us. And we can ask, okay, the very first people that created something, and or were we building on other acts of other people, of other designers, if I follow this this metaphor. So okay, let's move on. So what Jan Michl says or thinks about design and about activity of design, what design is, what design does, what you do as designers. Let's start with something clear, that's sort of also, I think, is a mainstream view, more or less, of what design is. So Michl agrees that design as an activity, it's intentional, meaning that there is an intent that you as a designer, you want to create something, so you do whatever you can to actually create it or to design it, which goes hand in hand with that it's a goal-oriented activity. So you are doing it consciously, but also you follow this goal, and you consciously want to get from place A to place Z, because you just want to get to whatever you are creating. Of course, the point is what do you do in the middle of the process? From how do you get from A to B or to A to Z? That's for another time, I think. And also, Michl agrees that the design is thoughtful, meaning that there is some kind of intelligence behind that. So it's not random, it's intentional, it's goal-oriented, and there's some kind of intelligence and creativity involved in designing. And so what is the result of design for Jan Michl? Okay, he says that, when we look at what designers actually produce, we see some kind of object or a result, a solution to the problem. And definitely there is some kind of creative contribution of a human being, of a designer to that solution. In other words, it didn't just, pop up out of nothing. And because it didn't pop up out of nothing, Michl stresses and emphasizes that designers do not start from scratch. And just keeping the Bible sort of metaphors and symbolism, in Latin we have this phrase creatio ex nihilo, meaning creation from nothing. And it's actually a sort of dogma of all Christianity, that the world was created out of nothing. By the way, I was just researching a few things for this presentation, and I didn't actually know that Jews and Judaism didn't believe in creation out of nothing up until the Middle Ages, because they interpreted the first book of Genesis in a different way than Christians, which is quite fascinating for me. And most Jews these days sort of agree with this creation out of nothing rather than from pre-existent matter. Anyway, so that was a sort of sidebar to our presentation. So Michl says that designers do not create out of nothing, ex nihilo. Ex nihilo means from nothing. Okay, so what does it mean, and how can we get or go from here, and where do we go from here? So there is one a quote from the text. I'll read it. Hopefully you won't mind. Michl says that although in one way it is correct to say that designers start from scratch, in other sense it is equally correct to maintain that in practice they can never start from scratch. It can be argued that designers always start off where other designers or they themselves have left off. That design is about improving earlier products, and that designers are thereby linked as through by umbilical cord to earlier objects, or more corrected to their own or to their colleagues' earlier solutions, and thus to the past. In other words, what the word design holds back is the entire cooperative and past-related dimension in designing that makes designers' individual creative contributions possible. I'll go back to the quote. I just read the other one. Nor does the word design satisfactorily capture the fact that design activity is never really complete with the final product, but because all products are by nature makeshift solutions, and as such can always be improved. Okay, just stop here for a while. He sort of reiterates what the previous quotations we cited say in a more or less the same way. But he says one important thing, that the word design, as we understand it these days, even though the essay was written, I don't know, 20 years ago, even more. But I think it holds up until today. That when we say design, we almost immediately, reflexively imagine a person or a team of people, like group of people, and they individually contribute to that particular product that they create, be it a graphic design, a poster, a packaging design, or architecture, a building. But the word design doesn't strike us as something that would immediately mean for us, a cooperative work that, is heavily influenced by the past, and that we cannot create, without looking to the past and to past designs and to past designers' works. And also, the word design, according to Michl, doesn't really strike us as a word that would, again, immediately tell us, yes, design. When we design, we are not making a final solutions. We are not creating something that stay there, forever, and it will be as good as it is now forever. So Michl urges us to think about design from the beginning of the text as something that is a collective, collaborative, and past-oriented activity. And also the design is really not about creating something that will be final. It's a sort of work in progress. Even after we finish our work, we still should think about design as a work in progress. It never ends, because there are always ways to improve what we did. And actually, there will be ways to improve what we did, because in 5 years, 10 years, generation, there will be new designers who will be redesigning what we have created, designing new spoons, new vases, new cars, new websites, if there are websites in 10 years, new apps, new posters, because there will always be reasons to improve or to change what we have created. So, which brings me to this paradox of design, as I call it, that, on the one hand, we want to be good designers. We want to create good things that, will stay as long as possible. But on the other hand, if we look at the entire history of design, we can see that, there have been like hundreds of thousands, if I'm exaggerating a little bit, but like thousands of different ways to create a spoon, or thousands of ways to create a poster, thousands of ways, to create other things. So the entire history of design sort of shows us that we have not created the perfect spoon. We have not created the perfect, poster. We have not created the perfect, let's say, computer or phone or building, a way to design building, because we always create new ways. We have new ways to create or to design buildings, spoons, and so on and so forth. So it's a paradox of design. On the one hand, we want to create something that is, as good as possible, but on the other hand, based on the entire history of design, we are sort of doomed to the situation where sooner or later our design objects, our design products will be obsolete, and someone else will come and will make it better, inevitably. Would you agree with that, by the way, with this paradox of design, or what I call paradox of design? Lucy, how about you? If you've disconnected and connected again, and if your battery works. Okay, maybe not. So how about you, Maravan? What's your reaction to this paradox of design, or seeming paradox of design?
I don't know, to be honest. It's quite confusing, not gonna lie.
Okay, why is it confusing? Which, is completely okay that it is confusing. It should be confusing, because I'm actually telling you perhaps something, or Michl is telling us something that, is not so well taught at schools. So why is it confusing? it's completely okay. It's confusing, but let's dive a little bit deeper and let's talk about why.
I think maybe because of the fact that we are trying to kind of like dive subconsciously into like the way we think and how we there's a point where we kind of like we have this sense of we can't accept that the fact that we kind of have failures and stuff like that. I don't know, it's really it's just a human nature, we kind of think about stuff in a way that no way we kind of failed at designing a specific thing, or just thinking that other designers, maybe that's their issue or something like that. I don't know. It's just the way I thought about it.
Okay, so if I may sort of paraphrase what you've just said, it seems to me that it is confusing because it goes against, let's say, the normal way of talking about design. Is it true, or that
Yeah,
it sort of wants you to think about design in a different way that perhaps doesn't feel that intuitive, doesn't feel that something as you sort of experience on a daily basis. And I agree. Michl is Michl is a theoretician and historian, so he not necessarily creates design or design things, but sometimes I think, and most of the times, people who are coming from theory and history, they have a larger picture of of the things that we do on the daily basis, and I think they can tell us something interesting and important that we do not notice because we are really so focused on our posters, our apps, websites, buildings, and so on. Okay, anyone else? So Alice, how about you? How do you feel about this paradox of what we've just said so far?
To be honest, I'm also quite confused, but I don't think it's necessarily a failure. I think that is just such a harsh way to put things, like to fail. Like I don't know. This might be just my personal interpretation, but I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think that's something being developed more and being better suited to our needs now than it was before that can necessarily mean it's a failure.
I think that's an excellent point as well. Thank you. Okay, I agree. But would you agree, Alice, that if you as a designer, you have a philosophy of design that you can actually create, you can actually sort of finish your work? Would you not agree, or well, perhaps would you or would you not agree if you say that you have finished your design and then a year later, someone else will take your design or similar things that you created and completely redesign it and will make it better? There is something sort of weird about saying that you have finished your design.
So do you want me to say if I agree if you can ever finish the design, or?
Yeah, perhaps.
No, I don't think so, because things are never still and everything around us, and we are always evolving. And even in a couple of minutes, we might not be the same person we were before. So I don't think we can put such a timestamp on things just to slow everything down so much that we can say, okay, now in this very moment it is complete, because it might be, but in I don't know, in a week it might not even serve its purpose anymore.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. We are evolving as human beings, be it like in our lives, we are changing, our personality is changing based on our experience. But I think we as a culture, humanity, society, we are also evolving. And even we as, organism, we are also biologically evolving. So there are different ways to say that we are evolving. I completely agree. But I think what Michl tries to sort of point to is that, on a daily basis, from our common daily experience, we say, every other day, oh, we've just finished, the design. I've already finished the app. I I finished the website, or when you are talking to a client, yeah, I will finish the website in 2 weeks. Please give me more time, or something like that. We normally use the word we finish the design. We finish what we are creating, and Michl just Michl just wants us to.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Please continue.
I don't necessarily think that the word finished in this sense means, oh, it's perfect. Like this is the best it's ever gonna be, and it does not need any changes. It just means that in this moment, in my capacity and in the things that I know about it, I am finished with this, because there might be some boundaries that we set, like how much effort we want to put into something. Sometimes I'm finished with the project, even though I know it's bad, and I know that I just don't want to work on it anymore. So I say that I'm finished, but I don't mean that I think it's the peak of perfection. I just think that it's reached all the balancing point where
Yes.
I think it's as good as it's gonna be with as much effort as I want to put into it.
Yeah, I think that's also a good point, that there are external limits that come, even like our own limits, but limits that just tell us that we have to stop working on it because there is no more time, there are no money left, so we cannot continue it, or we just don't have other ideas, so we just have this deadline, so we have to finish the work. Yeah, I agree that there are external limits that we have to follow as designers, definitely, and that's actually something that we will be talking about next in next presentation, continuing talking about sort of theoretical view of what we do as designers. But okay, coming back to Michl, we could sort of improve what he says and say that he believes that it's not stressed enough for designers that their work will never be finished, and you actually have to bear in mind that there is always something that you can improve, and it's just the nature of what you do. And if you are like hyper perfectionist and you believe that you can finish it to the point of perfection, you actually will not be a good designer for this reason, because it's impossible, even in theory, to finish what you do. So you have to have certain ways to decide where and when to finish. Okay.
May I say something about it?
Okay, you.
I think it's just human nature that people always want to improve something in a better way, and that always has been like that for centuries, for
Yes.
human history, I think. But then I think, however we try to make things better, I think eventually we make things worse in a way. Like the way it was before in the past, purely formed, it was better. I mean, it was perfect as how we were before. But so I think we are all failure in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I use the word failure, and I agree it may be too strong, but at the same time, I think it's useful to use a little bit stronger language, really, to emphasize a point. I mean, stronger, not vulgar or anything like that. Even sometimes a vulgar word can really, really emphasize something that makes sense to emphasize it at that particular moment in time and space and place. But yeah, I did use it on purpose. Okay, so we discussed why we think that design is never finished, and I would add to that there are these external pressures that sort of make us create new things, because as you said, all of you more or less, society changes, culture changes, technology changes, And 50 years ago, no one would talk about buying or designing a new smartphone for obvious reasons, because there were no smartphones. So new technologies bring to societies new problems. Problem of creating better smartphone, because you want to be you want to sell more smartphones than, let's say, Apple or other companies. So these, external things in culture and society, there might be even natural causes, like, climate changing rapidly, and there are more floods, it's hotter, and so on and so forth. So it also introduces new problems in a society, and which you can or you want to solve as a designer potentially. So design is never finished, because even if you create something that is really perfect, sooner or later something will change in a society, and it will trickle down, and the view on let's say on spoons or on buildings will change. The aesthetics will change, the taste will change, and that's one of many reasons why we create new and new things. Okay, so let's go to even more deeper into Michl's sort of arguments and thoughts. He believes that because designers don't start from scratch, but always build on previous works, Michl wants to find a better word that would capture this, looking at previous works, that would capture better than the word design, which according to Michl, we can agree or disagree with him, but according to Michl, connotates, or it forces us to believe that design is individual, more or less individual thing, more or less starting from scratch. You can create original things because designers are so creative, and so on and so forth. So Michl looks for a different word that would stress much more the collective work, oriented towards history and being inspired a lot by history. So he suggests using the word redesign. We already use the word redesign. Anyone would like to tell us, when or why we use the word redesign and what it means to you? And how do you think it differs from design? If you say I design things rather than I redesign things, what's the difference? For example, Aidan, if you are here with us, if you could, discuss this.
Yes, when you design basically from the scratch. You have only ideas and the desires of the client. But when you redesign, you're already working on some project that is already designed, and you just need to make some changes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. I'm just writing down this. Anyone would like to also tell us the difference between design and redesign, how you in practice, how you talk about it, how you think about it? Anastasia, for example, you?
Not really something different from Aidan's, but I wanted to say that it's design based on previous experience and looking for pretty similar goals. Like you have the same target audience and same usage of this design. For example, if you're doing rebranding, you still have the same clients who use it, and the same stuff that you sell, and etc.
Yeah, agree. I mean, what's interesting to me that we've just talked, and I do not take it as a mistake or anything like that. I think it's a nice example of how it is deep in us, how we think about design and difference between design and redesign. But what you said about design, it's that we start from scratch, whereas when we say we redesign something, we start from already existing things, existing designs, existing solutions. And it's interesting because in previous slides, I'm trying to interpret Michl, not interpret, I'm sort of using his words and sentences to say that this is exactly what we should not say about design. Michl disagree with us all that we cannot say that if we design, we start from scratch, and if we redesign, we start from already existing designs. Because for Michl, if we design, we also start from existing products. We do not start from scratch. Only God can do that. And on, you know, you can claim that you have these powers, but let's say not that most of us do not have these godly powers that we can create ex nihilo, as Michl says. Therefore, we can concede that, okay, we also start from already existing products. We do not start from scratch. If we really look deeper into what we do as designers, you know, we look online, we see inspiration, we look for inspiration on, I don't know, Pinterest and Tumblr and I don't know, social media, and we all have, you know, a list of interesting people we follow, you know, designers, artists. You know, we have things around us that also inspire us. And all of this is an argument for saying that we cannot, it's impossible for us to start from scratch. You know, it's just impossible because we are influenced by everything around us. And specifically as designers, of people we follow, other designers we follow and we like and we want to imitate, we want to do the same or similar work than they do. So please do not take it as it's a mistake that you said that. It was an excellent point, and I'm glad that you said it because, you know, it sort of shows how ingrained, how deep in us it is. And Michl says it's wrong, and that's the reason why I'm actually talking about him, because it's so. The first time I saw it or I read it, I disagreed, but you know, more and more I was thinking about it. I think Michl is right. And I just wanted to tell you why he's right and what it means for us as designers and students and teachers.
I also wanted to disagree at first, but then I thought that we start almost every project from mood boarding and finding some references. And
yes, exactly.
That's the point of it. Like we're taught about it, like every teacher said, like do mood boards at first, find references, and then start your process. So yeah, we can't start from scratch, even if we're, I don't know, draw a picture for ourselves, not for a study. We have some references in our heads.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you wanted to start from scratch, let's say designing a poster, you know, digital poster, you would have to invent computers. You would have to invent, I don't know, Adobe Photoshop or whatever, you know, Illustrator, whatever program you are using. You would have to actually create the entire society, because without society, there is no need for posters, I believe. You know, if you are living on a desert island, I think you wouldn't be creating posters every day. Or maybe you would, I don't know, maybe you like creating posters so much that you would be creating posters anyway. But, you know, most of the time you create posters for someone else, or for, you know, a client or an event, or, you know, your own thing. And, you know, I'm exaggerating a little bit again, but, you know, that's what Michl says. And that's what the quote by Karl Popper says. You know, if you want to start from Adam, you would end up, you know, in Adam and nothing else. You know, you would have to create the entire universe to create new apple pie, because it's impossible to create new apple pie, because you would be, you know, basing your apple pie on the works of other people that came before you. Okay, so I'm glad that it starts to sort of make sense a little bit. So why the word redesign? You know, why Michl says, okay, let's scratch design, let's not use it, let's just use the word redesign for what we do as designers. Okay, he says that just the prefix, the re part implies an evolutionary outlook or look on design. You know, that we evolve, people evolve, even what we do evolve, our designs evolve. You know, what you do at the beginning of your project really looks or should look differently than what you actually submit as a quote unquote finished product, a finished assignment. So it implies this evolution of what you do. And there is a relation to the previous solutions, because exactly as Aidan said, and others, redesign means, well, you build on what already exists. So there is this connection, intimate connection to already existing things and products. That's the link with the past, basically. And it's much better in arguing, not arguing, but in our heads, it rings the bell that it's not finished. There's an illusion of finished product, as we said, and redesign really strongly argues, well, you are redesigning, meaning that you are correcting, you are building upon some already existing thing. And this is interesting, and I think this is why I actually even mentioned Michl in user-centered design class, and not many people do that. No one does that. I'm pretty sure that no one does that because Michl is not so well known, and I think not many people see the. No, sorry, that sounds arrogant. Michl is not so well known, and it's not so. It's not so obvious that there is a connection with user-centered design, but in my opinion, there is. And the connection is that if you think of design as redesign, the stress, the importance goes from you as a designer to your user or your client, because you are redesigning something because of your client or users told you that it doesn't work. We need to make it better. So there is this shift in the relation between you as a designer and clients, that you are not this semi-god as a designer, that you are always right, and your designs are the best the way you think that they should be. But there is this importance of other people, of users and clients, that tell you, well, it doesn't work for us. We need changes. We need to redesign. So that's why I think this approach to our understanding of design, and Michl and his understanding of design, it fits well into user-centered design, because we are centering user rather than you as a designer. And last but not least, there is already the word design in it, so it's not that different. It's just slightly different. It's sort of an edit, of design. It's not a new thing, which is also, in the philosophy of redesign, that you are, not creating a completely new word, but you are using already existing words to create something new, which is quite nice, I think. That's what I just said. Okay, so Michl in the text then goes and asks, why part of the problem that we have this, for Michl, bad understanding of design? Why does it sort of the word itself is a problem? Because of already what we said, the connotations we have for design, but also the meanings that go beyond what we do as designers, meanings that are used in culture. And if you look in a vocabulary, or sorry, dictionary, you can see that the meaning of design can be explained like it's a goal. There's a plan, or it can be designed as a technical or artistic drawing. Actually, it can be. But also slightly, literary meaning. It's an intrigue or plot or conspiracy. And there is another Czech philosopher, Wilhelm Flusser, who actually defines design as a plot or conspiracy to capture users, to capture people into your designs. And I actually like this definition of design as well, but it's a slightly different thing. But according to Michl, there is this influence of, specifically in English language and in the English culture, there is this influence of one person called William Paley. And he was an English Anglican priest, and he actually used design as a word to argue for God's existence. So because he used design and this idea of watchmaker, a person who creates or designs watches, as something that we can, we can say about God as well, or we can explain God with. And basically, he says that if we look around us, and this was before Charles Darwin and evolutionary theory, if we look around us, everything is so complex. The eye of animals, the nature, the trees, everything is so complex. Human beings are so complex, and it's impossible that they just popped out, out of nothing. So because we know that watches and clocks do not, come into existence out of nothing, we need a designer or an engineer or a maker or a craftsman or craftsperson. We need someone to create it. Therefore, we have to say, according to in 18th century, according to William Paley, that the world itself must have been created, and people must have been created, because like watches, they just do not come into existence, without an artist, without a designer, without a creator. All right, so only Charles Darwin, 19th century, showed that actually there is a possibility to explain the complexity of things around us. And that's the famous theory of evolution. And I do not want to go that deeply into that, but because we have already mentioned the word evolution, I think that it's interesting to sort of, understand what it means in the context of evolutionary approach to understanding design. Darwin said, more or less, that we can create complex things. It takes time for nature, but it can, complex things like animals, eyes, of human beings, which are really complex artifacts, natural artifacts, they can be created if we have enough time, and if there is a sort of selection of things based on whether they work or whether they are useful for particular environment or not. And if they are not useful, nature gets rid of them. And if they are useful for particular environment and natural sort of purposes in a way, they stay in the gene pool, and they are recreated in next generations. So for evolution to work, and let's not talk about just natural evolution, but evolution, generally speaking, you need to have something that selects what is good and what is not good. And then you have to have a nature, that is nature. Nature selects what is good, what is not, what stays, in a gene pool, what survives, what doesn't survive. And you also have to have selection of possibilities. In biological evolution, it's mutations, but in let's say evolution of design artifacts, it can be that you have a lot of designers having different opinions about what is good and what is not. So they design different things, and then users or customers will select what is good and what is not, and what is good will more or less be created again and again, and what is not good, because you do not get enough money for being able to design the same thing, you stop designing because it doesn't bring you money. So there is this parallel analogies between natural selection and, let's say, the way how economics, how business selects for good products and bad products. Okay, that's just William Paley and his book, where he argued that we can sort of say that God must exist because things around us, nature wasn't created out of nothing, but God must have created it. And there is also a reason why he used the metaphor of watchmaker, because in 18th century and even before that, up until 19th century, clocks were really the pinnacle, the top of technology at the time. And we know that technology influences how we think about the world. You know, these days you listen to people like Elon Musk, who says that we live in a computer simulation. I mean, it's really impossible to say that we live in a computer simulation, I don't know, 100 years ago or 200 years ago. Even though there were philosophers who actually were saying something similar, but they didn't use the word computer simulation because there were no computers, right? But there were clocks and mechanical things that more or less, you know, work like very slow computers, if I, you know, take it to the extreme. And people started thinking about word and what God does as, you know, something like an engineer or watchmaker. And basically the word functions as a very, very complicated watch. That's why we can see, you know, various illustrations of it in a culture. And that's why actually William Paley used this argument, God as watchmaker, because almost everybody understood that, you know, this metaphor that, you know, complicated mechanical objects are something that we can use to argue that the world exists like that. It's like if we said today, well, maybe God is a programmer or God is a software designer and he or she designed our world and we are just, you know, avatars, we are just characters in a game. You know, that's the similar thing. That's how people understood watches and mechanical objects, clocks and so on in 18th century. So it was obvious for them. Okay, I just want to, you know, to give you a little bit more details about this idea of evolution and selection. Selection is even more important for us because you as designers, you select what you want to create, a business and economics and, you know, capitalist societies, you know, select what they want to buy. So you as a designer, if you want to get money, you sort of have to follow a little bit what people want, which can lead to various, you know, different new types of technologies, let's say. And, you know, there is also this artificial selection, not as designers, but as breeders of dogs. You know, we know the dogs started as wolves, and because of selection and selective breeding, we sort of created new types of breeds of dogs. And actually, sometimes they are really striking. On the left, you can see sort of illustration paintings of dogs in, I think, 19th century. And on the right, you can see, you know, the current basically breed of the dog, but you can see that it looks strikingly different, even though it's genetically more or less the same breed. But because we chose dogs based on how they look, and then you know, we're breeding them after hundreds of years, you know, we sort of bred them into these types of dogs that look differently than their ancestors. You know, I like this this picture that in 1957, you know, if you talk about chickens, you know, they were very, very thin, very skinny, and because of selective breeding, because of selection, we actually created artificially chickens that look more or less like those chickens on the right. You know, very, very heavy, a lot of meat, right? And this is really an extreme example, but existing examples. This is a type of an animal that actually was also artificially selected. Not, you know, there was no genetic engineering. It was just that people noticed in the past that this animal or this breed, you know, has more muscularity, and they bred them, you know, with other who had more muscles, and sooner or later, after 50 years, you know, if you do that, you'll get to cows that look like that. Okay, so if you need evolution, you need something that selects, something that provides, you know, different types, different mutations, different variations, and you also need some kind of mechanism that inherits what you have done in previous generations. So to make it more concrete for us designers, let's say, economical pressures, business pressures, capitalist society pressures, pressures designers to create something. Because there are many designers, each designer will create something slightly different or even strikingly different to the economical, business pressures. And because we all build on previous designs and previous works of previous designers, there is this inheritance, that we inherit the designs and solutions of designs from our past. Okay, so that's why we can think about, why we can use the word evolution even for design, even though it may not be that obvious at the beginning. It may not be even obvious, right now. Hopefully, I can talk about it next presentation, or at the end of this presentation, you can ask me, and I'll try to explain it even more. Why this matters. Okay, in the text, coming back to Michl, he asks very important question. So, if we agree that first, we do not start as designers from scratch, we always build on others, and what it means that if that the word design really is complicates things, because if we say design, we mean something different than redesign. And for us, design more or less means something that we do ourselves, like individually, more or less. It can be finished what we do. And we are designers, and it's our work. Whereas redesign is something that is, it's worse. Redesign is not really full design. It's just, something different. It's worse, because you just correct things. You do not do a proper design. So what are the consequences for us as designers, as students, as teachers? Well, he says that actually design theory and design history lacks any meaningful way to talk about, design as redesign. And, we and as students, especially, or designers in general, we use words like, well, we are influenced by, or we were inspired by, we use this mood board, and it's our inspiration. We are not really redesigning anything. It's just our inspiration. Or, we build upon the work of other people, or we say we start from, from our famous, or favorite designer. We build on his or her work, or we start from where he left or where she left. Sometimes, if we are more honest, we can say, we just copy, what others did, because we don't have much time, just copy that and it's okay. And sometimes, we say, oh, not that we say that, but sometimes we are accused of stealing other people's works. And I think there is this famous book called like Steal Like Artist, or Artist Steal. Do you know it? Have you heard about it? It's not an academic book, but it's a popular book. But what the book basically argues is that, if you want to be an artist, I mean, there is this saying, I think, good artists copy and best artists steal, something like that. You may have heard that. And this, I try to look it up, by the way. Good artists steal, something like that. Oh, I mean, that's the quote from Pablo Picasso. Good artists borrow, great artists steal, but steal like an artist. Okay, Austin Kleon. Yeah, Steal Like an Artist. And it's basically the book that argues that, you cannot create from scratch, as Michl says. So, Why not be inspired a lot by others? Yeah. In other words, be honest and give it the right proper name, honest name, what you do. Well, you copy, you even steal, and it's okay because everybody does that. According to this book, and I'm not sure Michl would agree that you should steal, but you should be honest about your sources of inspiration, and that it's not these were not just your ideas. You built on it, but you do not start from scratch. Okay, so let me go back to the presentation. Yeah, I do not need to project the presentation on the television. It's just, I'm used to it. Okay. And there is this, according to Michl, there is this fetishism of originality. That, as designers, we are almost forced to be original because it sells. If you say about yourself, "Oh, I'm not original," you are done as designer. You cannot say that. So you have to be as original as possible, and that's a problem because, according to Michl, you cannot be original. It's impossible, even in theory, to be original, or at least not to the degree and extent that you think that you are original. Okay, and Michl, as a design historian, he says, well, we are also to be blamed or to blame because we as theorists and historians, we are also much more focused on the past, rather, just saying, oh, this happened in 18th century, it looked like this and that, rather than using the past old artifacts to say something meaningful and important about present, but even about future. In other words, according to Michl, historians and design theorists should actually use, past artifacts, past design to explain present, to explain future, to say, well, this happened in the past. And it's highly likely that what designers were doing in 18th century, 19th century, at the beginning of 20th century, we are doing almost the similar things. We are solving similar problems. So it makes sense to go back and to see what they did, understand what they did and why they did that, and take that understanding of what they did and use it, apply it to 21st century context. So in other words, if you are designing an app or a website, and it's, let's say it's 1998, it makes sense to go back to beginning of the 20th century to see what graphic designers did in Bauhaus, in Swiss international, movement of graphic design, what they did in typography. They invented grids. They invented, how individual fonts and typefaces, go together. They talked about white space, why it's important, to have, a space on a page, because, having a white space will emphasize, type and, illustrations and so on. Especially the grids were very important. Especially European graphic design used grids a lot. And, and you as a beginner web designer in 1998, you can actually get a lot of ideas from graphic design of the beginnings of 20th century, because web page is more or less a page as well. You use typefaces as to you work with images, you work with fonts. So why not be inspired? And nowadays it's a commonplace. We use grids, we use various typefaces and typography rules from the beginning of 20th century. It's common, but at the beginning of when web design and web as technology started, you know, you could see disastrous designs that they were unusable. And basically people wanted to imagine that you know, you go back to 1995, 1998, and you know, you want to design a website for, I don't know, for a shop. And you could actually see that designers were creating a shop, like the physical shop. They sort of illustrated the shop on a website, you know, with person, you know, behind the desk, with the desk, and you know, the cupboards, and you know, everything like that. And you basically click on the desk, you click on the cupboards, you click on the shelves to buy things, because you know, at the time people, they don't have reference, you know, any other reference than just the real world, or they thought, because when, you know, properly educated designers started to become web designers, well, they thought, well, we were learning, we were taught about this European graphic design history, and you know, even graphic design in the US, in Japan, and Korea, and we can apply these rules. Why not on a web page? And that's what they did. And you know, once properly educated graphic designers started to be web designers, we see, you know, the beginning of talk of grids, of typefaces, of, you know, color theory, you know, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it was a sidebar, sorry for that. Coming back to our presentation. According to Michl, design as a field, or let's say design history and theory and in education, lacks something what Michl names reverse engineering of existing artifacts. And what it means, you probably have heard the phrase reverse engineering. Just in a nutshell, it means that, especially if you are an engineer, if you are just technically minded person, if you want to understand why something works the way it works, the best way to do it, to understand things, is to, you know, to open it, to break it down to pieces, and then see how it works. And then hopefully you can, you know, put it back, and it still works, and you have this understanding, deep understanding of how things work. And this activity of, you know, breaking things, you know, and opening and seeing how it works, and perhaps, you know, using this knowledge to create something new, or something seemingly new, it's called reverse engineering. And Michl said that we should be doing exactly the same thing for designers. We should take, I don't know, this Apple mouse, and we should, you know, break it down, not necessarily physically, but let's say intellectually, and we should ask ourselves, you know, why it looks the way it looks, what it does, how designers were thinking about designing this mouse, you know, why it's called mouse in the first place, and why does it look like this, you know, and where's the tail, you know, if it is a mouse, you know, where's the tail, you know, and all these things. And Michl says that by reverse engineering design objects, we can get much better understanding of why these objects look the way they do. And after that, we can apply this knowledge from this reverse engineering to our own design, because we will understand what the designers were trying to solve. So by reverse engineering this mouse, let's say, from a design point of view, I can reverse engineer, you know, why it looks like it looks, and I can even reverse engineer what designers of this mouse were trying to solve. What were their problems? Perhaps one of their problems was they wanted to create a mouse without cable. So they had to design it in a way it will have a battery somewhere. You know, you have to put battery somewhere. Also, you have to put a technology that will be able to connect with your computers wirelessly. You know, and all these things will start to come out, and you will start to understand that perhaps if you yourself want to create a wireless mouse, you need to create space in your design for a battery and for the technology that will connect this mouse to a computer.
It's actually, can I add something to your mouse?
Sure.
I'm not sure if it's the same model, but does it have it like a charging hole on the bottom?
It does. I think. Yeah, I think it's this one.
Yeah, I actually read about this, that they put it on the bottom so that people don't use it plugged in, so it remains wireless at all times. So just wanted to add that.
Okay, and would you think that this is a best way to, I mean, would you not want your users to use your mouse even when it's charging, when it's being charged?
Well, they didn't, so they solved
Yeah,
it.
yeah, okay.
I'd like to think their choice was for another reason, actually, to buy another mouse and have it on standby.
Yeah.
It's Apple. They, you know.
Yeah, actually, it's the worst mouse I've ever used, I think.
Really? How come?
It's really uncomfortable and you have to charge it all the time. And when you charge, you cannot basically use the mouse. So
Yeah,
it's,
that's what we said. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so it actually is tough. Like when I want to work, potentially it stops me. So I don't like the fact that it works like that.
Yeah, to be honest, I do not like this mouse either, but it's just that I have never used Apple mouses. I've always used different brands. I do not want to make advertisement for other brands, even though I'm already doing for Apple, even though we are criticizing Apple mouse. Yeah, I think both or all of the things might be Apple-like, because it makes sense to me that Apple didn't want to use wireless mouse with cables, with wires. It's I can completely imagine that that was one of the primary goals. If we call it wireless, let's never use. I mean, do not ever let users to use it with cables, because the whole magic would be gone. Now, I think the mouse is called Magic Mouse. Is it not? Right? Yeah. Also, I do believe that Apple wants you to buy as many stuff as possible, especially cables and reductions, and docks and these things. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was in minds of Apple designers. Well, maybe people will have two mouses. Why not? Or not mouses, two mice, mouses. Yeah. Okay, two mice. So somehow it sounds weird to say to Apple mice, but I mean, I think it's grammatically correct. Okay, to Apple mouses. Yeah, I like it better. Okay, so reverse engineering. That's important, according to Michl, in design education, because we will know what problems designers were trying to solve, and we can take advantage of their intelligence, their problems that they solved. Okay, and you know what? Let's have a pause, if you do not mind. I just go for a water, and I think it's an hour and a half already, so it makes sense to have a pause. So it's 6:32. Let's have, I don't know, 5-minute pause. Is it okay? So I don't know. Let's come back at 6:40. So it will be 7 minutes. Okay. Okay, good. So see you in 7 minutes. Okay, so I am back. How about you?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. So we are waiting for you, Marwan. Aida, Alice.
I'm here.
Okay, good. All right then. So reverse engineering, yes. All right then. So let's finish with this section, and we will continue with this next time as well, or at the beginning of next week's class. And Michl asks this question: why do we think that, if we agree with him, why do we think that this whole discussion about design being collective, cooperative, work, not only with your team members? I mean, that's okay. Everybody can imagine that. Most people do work in teams these days. But especially you as an individual designer, that even you, if you are creating only yourself, if you work with cooperation with all previous designers, and of course it's up to you. If you take advantage of the work of previous designers, you should, according to Michl, because you can learn a lot by a reverse engineering, be it mouse or any other artifact designed and created by other human beings. Well, even nature. I think we definitely can find a lot of inspiration in nature as well, but that's not necessarily what Michl argues or talks about. So in other words, everything around us is a mood board. Everything around us is a mood board that we can be inspired by, and we are inspired by, whether we like it or not. And every time we are opening, a graphic design software app, or we are sketching something on our paper, we are consciously or unconsciously being inspired or starting from or building on or even copying or stealing from other people with whom we are other designers or even artists or architects with whom we are connected inevitably. So we are connected to the past. Every single time we are designing something, we are connected to the past. And so if we agree with that, and if we agree that the word design itself is, it's a word that doesn't capture this properly, doesn't capture this cooperative, non-individual, collaborative with the past type of design activity. So why is it not taught that much at schools? Why is it something that seems and feels intuitively unnatural? Even we at the beginning of our class, it was confusing. It should be confusing. I have to add. So why is it?
I think it's because it's not ideally inspiring.
It's not what? Sorry.
I think it's not ideally inspiring to convince students.
Yeah. Could you just tell us a little bit more about this idea?
Oh, well, it's basically not so positive as a concept. So we as a designers, I think, should to be more original in a way, I think.
Okay, so you or we, let's say you as designers, as design students, you want to think about yourself as being original, being creative, having own, ideas, creative ideas, And if someone, comes and tells you, well, you cannot be that, you cannot be that, it's impossible, even in theory, it's just an illusion. I guess it is not that inspiring than, telling you, go to the world and be original, be creative, create new things, change the world. Yeah, I agree. That's one part or one bit why, it's not a good sell. It doesn't sell that well, but I wouldn't say, and Michl doesn't think, that it's that negative. I think it may be even freeing. It can give you, freedom, even more freedom than you have. Okay, let's get to why it can give you a freedom and what Michl thinks about why it's not taught that much at schools. Okay, in a way, Michl says that there is this idea that if you study or teach design, or even in general, that we can separate past or present from the past. So it can be done. And Michl says, well, it's not possible because every single thing in the present is saturated, is full of past things. So there is this, Michl says, there is this false idea that history just goes from from here to there, and present and future is here. And if we are here, we do not need to go back here because we are already here. We just need to think about future, more or less, or present, but not here. It's the past. There is nothing good in the past. It was superseded. It was it was improved already. But Michl actually says, and this is a quite political statement, and I do not talk about politics, I mean, in our class anyway, but not, when I'm teaching, just a philosophy of mine, or if I'm not, teaching philosophy or political philosophy. But actually, he says something interesting, I believe, and that's why it makes sense to me to mention it. And we will talk about it next time more. That if we believe that what's present and future it's better than what's past, well, does it not mean that countries and societies that live in Western country past are worse inevitably than the shining illuminating present and future of rich Western democratic countries? Does it not follow from it? No, logically. And Michl says, maybe there are certainly countries and societies that are not that rich, are not that democratic, that don't use the latest technologies. And if you look at the from the Western perspective, if you look at the past, something really bad, something that should stay in the past, and we are in present and future, and that's better. We are actually looking down upon societies that still live in our past in a way. Let's say technological past, because they do not use the latest technologies, for whatever reason. And just a sidebar, just off topic a little bit. There is this interesting argument about going completely green in terms of electricity and energy everywhere in the world. And there is this idea ingrained in many people in the Western societies that everybody on the planet should go green as soon as possible because we need to save the planet here and now. But I mean, for obvious reasons, there are societies that are not so technologically developed, that get most of their energy from from coal or from not so green sources of energy. And we know that thanks to using not so green energies, Western countries actually became rich and technologically developed. And it can be argued that it is almost a Western chauvinism, or even maybe, I do not want to say racism, but sort of chauvinism is a better word, that, we Western countries, we could use coal and other, like not green energy sources to become rich and prosperous. Now we are rich and prosperous, and you, like third world countries, you have to use green energy as well. You cannot use coal any longer, even though coal would make you rich and also prosperous. But you cannot do that because no, we are now, rich and prosperous, we Western countries, and therefore you have to use the same thing as we do. You cannot get, rich and prosperous thanks to coal, because coal is it's not green. And I mean, it's off topic. Michl doesn't talk about it, obviously. I mean, not obviously, but doesn't talk about it. But to my mind, it does stem from the idea that history sort of, evolves linearly from here to here to here and to here. And who is here, it's better than who's here. And if you look at history like that, inevitably the past for you is the past. It's not important. But for you as a designer, it's even tragic. I mean, for the society, it is tragic as well, of course. But we are here in a design class, so let's talk about design and designers, because the past is, as I said, the past is one big mood board for you. And you can be inspired by technology from the beginning of 20th century. You can be inspired by technology from, 18th century. You can be inspired by posters or, not posters, but by, by designs, illustrations, paintings, of course, from previous generations, previous centuries. And especially if you apply this reverse engineering technique, and you really want to, get into why the artist, why the designer made it this way and not that way, and what he or she was thinking, and what kind of problems were they solving. It can really enrich you as a designer intellectually and even spiritually, because you will have much better connection to the past, to the rich, history of the field. And Michl says that this separation of the past from the present is really tragic, and you are getting rid of yourself of this big mood board that past is. And you shouldn't think of past and past designs as dead designers, dead designs. They are still living, they are still around us in the works and the designs that we use, but we do not even realize that. I mean, you probably know that the whole Apple design was inspired by Dieter Rams, who, I think he's still alive. Gosh, I think he's pretty old, but he's still alive. He's a German designer who used to work for Braun, the German technology. They used to produce electric appliances and audio stuff. Nowadays, Braun is mostly used for machines for shaving for men and even women. But in the past, they were creating really great objects, great industrial design, great product design. And Dieter Rams was their chief designer. And Jonathan Ive, who used to be up until recently the chief designer for Apple, he says, he admits that he was inspired heavily designing iPod by Dieter Rams, by designing MacBooks by Dieter Rams. You can actually see it. By the way, if I'm talking about it, why not show you that? Okay, so sorry, I have to look there because on the television, because I'm sharing the screen and I'm using it as a second screen. But yes, you can see on the left, it's a radio designed by Dieter Rams, and on the right, it's an iPod. It's the old hard disk iPod with the famous click wheel user interface. And the calculator app was straight directly taken from the physical calculator designed by Brown and by Dieter Rams. And the same thing is on the top right corner. I think it's a speaker. It's a Brown speaker, like from 60s, 70s, and you can see that there's a striking resemblance to how IMAX used to look, and I think they still look pretty similar. I do have an IMAX in front of me here, and it looks still very similar. Okay, so in a way, if Dieter Rams, hadn't been a designer, we wouldn't have Apple products, or we would have, but they would look very different. And yeah, I think I do not want to talk about this political, sociological aspect of treating history and past with respect. But I mean, I read about this, chauvinism, Western chauvinism of, forcing poorer countries to go green. And to me, it's an interesting argument against, against full-blown, green energy everywhere in the world. Because I do believe that if Western countries had the possibility to use coal and non-green energy to get rich, I think other countries have the right to do it as well.
Well, actually, that's a common issue, I think, and a common topic to talk about. And I mean, both sides is right. I think they have points, but it's hard to discuss actually because it's all about the power games. So, well,
Oh yeah, yes,
yeah. So I'm not really sure how it's gonna go.
yeah. It's a big topic, obviously, and to be honest, I do not have the proper understanding of how, let's say, the other side, even though it's a terrible way to say it, the other side, like Asian countries. It's a terrible way to say it from my mouth, not from you. But I do not have the proper understanding of the discussion that is, in, let's say, Korea, Japan, China. But I do believe that there is a moral argument to have, to say, well, you Western countries, you could use coal, you could get rich. Now we cannot use it. Why? It's not fair.
Well, obviously, I think the countries like that wouldn't actually follow the rules. Obviously, I think it's not going to be complete green energy. I think, at least next, I don't know, 10 or 20 years.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sil, for the input to the discussion. Okay, so it's 7 o'clock. Hopefully, I didn't bore you that much with my sort of off-topic discussion. Anyway, I thought when I was creating the presentation that we will probably discuss these, the why question. Why is it that you are not taught that much? For the next presentation, and more or less, I was right. So these let's say these causes, these reasons, we will discuss at the beginning of next presentation. So hopefully you are sufficiently interested, inspired to be interested in discussing these points next time. Just one thing, I will talk briefly about modernism in architecture and functionalism in architecture at the beginning of next class, and I will mention something that you may have heard: forms follow function, and I will tell you that it's not what it seems to be, or at least the founders, those people who actually coined the term or the phrase forms follow function. It doesn't mean what you think it means. And Michl actually argues that it's almost the opposite. And it's, again, a chauvinistic argument for architects to do whatever they want to do. So users do not have the say in designs. So it's a non-user-centered phrase. And I think it's good to mention it. Okay, and also the business importance of the new, that's the fetish of the originality, it's a similar thing. And of course, the importance of, or the brand of designers. I mentioned Jonathan Ive as the designer in Apple, and we all know his name, but he wasn't the only designer in Apple. I guess they have like 200 or 100, or I don't know, like 50 designers at least. And do we know their names? I'm not sure, actually. And the name sells, and you can see that the most famous designers actually sell their products under their name. Their name is the brand, and it's very stimulating, or to go this route, to want to have your name to be the brand. And the prestige of fine arts, which is an interesting argument, that designers consciously or unconsciously want to be artists, but they cannot be for several reasons, but they still want to enjoy the prestige of fine art and artists. So let's talk about it next time. So hopefully this presentation was useful, or at least interesting, if not useful, for you. And before we go, are there any questions, comments, reactions, feedback?
Well, I like the fact that it was very philosophical, because most of the classes are not like this. So I liked it. Thank you.
Oh, I do thank you as well. Oh, Lucy, hello. You can see you at the end. Last but not, it's what is it in English? It's better late than never.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't home and I had problems with battery, but I was listening all the time, except the time when my battery died. So sorry about that.
Yeah, okay, it's okay. I'm actually recording this presentation because I sort of thought, it's a little bit theoretical, so I thought maybe you would like to watch it again. And also because Jan Michl and this design as a redesign concept, it will be one of the topics that you can choose for your visual essay. So I thought, maybe you would like to watch it again. Okay, so any other things before we go? Okay, so next time we will finish Jan Michl, and we will move to design patterns, which in my opinion sort of stem from Jan Michl, even though actually Jan Michl talks about design patterns, I'm sorry. And he talks about this guy who invented design patterns. His name is Christopher Alexander. He's an architect, and he also is a super mathematician, and he sort of invented design patterns for architecture because he wanted normal people, everyday people, to be able to be architects themselves, and to use the best ideas, the best solutions in architecture for themselves. And I really like it, and I think it fits very well into user-centered design, and it also fits well to what Jan Michl says, that we should be inspired by the past, consciously, directly, without apologies, because we are doing that anyway. And these design patterns are basically packages of solutions that turned out to be good solutions to design or architecture or urbanism problems. So why not use them again and again? Okay, so thanks everyone so much for the attention, for the discussion. I really like it. I always like it when we discuss things. I understand that this is a little bit theoretical and confusing, but hopefully it's a little bit clearer now what Michl and we meant by saying that you cannot start from scratch as a designer. It's not a bad thing actually, because if you had to start from scratch, you already know where you would end it up, right? Okay, so thank you. Have a great evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you as well. Bye.